everybody. My name is H. Cabral, and this is How to End Prejudice. We're kicking this off. This is our very first interview with two incredible thought leaders. Cannot wait to introduce them to you because you will learn a ton today as you watch this, and you also get to meet two of my heroes and friends. How to End Prejudice is going to try to tackle this incredibly bold and maybe outrageous idea of can we end prejudice, and try to break this down into real practical steps backed up by real stories, things that are actually happening around us in communities. And in today's context, you will see something really specific we find beautiful. But it's such a large goal. Can we do it? Are people doing it in small ways? Are they ending prejudice, and how? So today's topic, and for the very first interview, is how to end prejudice in college campuses. And to lead us today in this conversation so we can learn from both of them are two, as I said, of my close friends who are willing to take the step and be the first here. And also, I think, incredible heroes in this area. They've both challenged me, and I've learned from them incredible amount already on how to live a genuine life that breaks barriers, that unites, fights against prejudice and for unity. They're both realistic people. They're both pragmatic, but also incredibly hopeful. And I think you will be encouraged today. So let me introduce them to you all so you can get to know them a bit. With us today, we have Evan Green. He is the Director of Intercultural and Spiritual Life at Rochester University here in Michigan. He's been a higher ed professional of 6 years, now with oversight of campus ministry, intercultural life, and other institutional-wide efforts relating to diversity. He loves Jesus, justice, food, sports, and books, all things that I love too. That's why I think we get along. Thank you so much for being here, Evan.
Thank you so much for the invitation, man. I appreciate that. Glad to be here.
Absolutely. And also with us, a great friend as well, Cam Underdown, who has more than a decade of launching new ministries, churches, nonprofits, primarily in campus environments. As a husband, father, Pontiac resident, and OU alumnus, Cam is well connected in local faith communities and community development organizations around Oakland County here in Michigan. And additionally, he has a background in web development, which he used to pioneer new technologies to connect people and build relationships. Thanks, Cam.
Awesome to be here. Really excited to be talking with you both.
Yeah, it's hard to summarize and wrap up all that you both do and represent in a short intro bio, but there it is. So I think we should just jump right into it. You're both have worked in college campuses or are working, have positions of influence. You're shaping campus cultures, either as Evan on staff or Cam even doing work from a different perspective.
And the grassroots end for me.
Yes.
Very meaningful.
Yeah, Evan's like, yeah, we need more Cams everywhere, and I know Cam knows how important Evan's work is. So, to both of you, from a grassroots perspective and a staff perspective, is it possible to end prejudice in college campuses? Maybe we'll start with you, Evan. Is that are we going to? Is this going to be a short interview, and you're going to just say no, we can't do this, or do you have hope that we can end prejudice in college campuses?
Yeah, there's definitely a short and a long answer. The short answer is no, I don't think that our meaningful collective work that is necessary can end prejudice on college campuses. However, that is not absent of hope, right? We have to continue to live in that space. Otherwise, like the meaningful work we do, it's easy to get burned out. It's easy to get jaded. But it's a necessary work to raise awareness to issues of prejudice, bias incidents, wherever discrimination takes place on college campuses, right? These are, they become communities where students go to learn and live, classroom, extracurricular. And so this is a necessary work. So while I don't believe that everything that we're doing will end it per se, we can help improve the climate. We can help improve the culture that takes place on campuses. One of the reasons why I don't think that we can necessarily end it is because just by default, naturally, we all come from varying backgrounds and places, and we get to campus, whether we're staff, faculty, or students, we just have these built-in implicit biases, prejudice behaviors, ideals, and thoughts, like they are heart matters. And so we can do really, really good work that doesn't necessarily work out a heart issue because it's very personal. And so in order to end it, like that burden becomes on the weight, the responsibility of that individual person to work out those issues and those problems. What our responsibility can do is to raise awareness, which we'll talk about a lot in our conversation. What are these practical steps and things that we can do? So those are just some of my early thoughts about why it's really difficult to do that. One of the other challenges I think about not being able to end it is like college campuses it's a revolving door. You have attrition. You're constantly getting new incoming classes. So while it's an institution of higher learning, we're constantly educating through our classrooms, whatever your campus or university values are, and the things that like my department might do. Then you get a new group of students who you've got to kind of communicate and work through sharing those values and kind of let them know what you represent. So it's a tall order. It's necessary. We have to remain committed to it and hopeful. But it's one of those things that I don't know that we can definitively just like root out. Can we improve it? Absolutely. There's a lot of things that we'll get a chance to try to unpack that we can do to help the nature of prejudice on campuses.
Thanks, Evan. No, it's very good. Cam, where's your level of hope in ending prejudice on college campuses?
Yeah, I'm pretty much with Evan on this one. It's I want to believe it's possible. Is it likely? No, it's not likely at all, right?
Yeah.
We're talking about prejudice. We're talking about this tendency to prejudge and really believe something about somebody else or a group of people, and it's just part of the human experience to be able to do that. And when we talk about prejudice more on this negative side, we talk about biases and we talk about it being something we want to end, we're really getting into talking about condemnation, right? Writing off, trying to censure, trying to basically eliminate the voice of a person or a group of people based on preconceived ideas that we have, conscious or not. And the difficulty with that, again, is that so much of our prejudices are like they're just unconscious. So we can do our best to try to bring those to light, but it is very challenging. The two things that do give me hope, though, one is that the college campus, university campus, they're filled with students. All right, so that's a plus. Students are supposed to be there to learn. They're supposed to have a posture of learning, a humility, and a curiosity, and all of those can be real antidotes to prejudice in this world, in our community. And the second is just the college campus's unique environment. This is not a real term anywhere, so don't go looking for it, but this is something that I just use again in the grassroots world that I'm in. And we talk about social potential, and on a college campus, you have more opportunity to meet people and experience people, and you have more availability all combined than you may ever have again in your entire life.
Wow.
Right? A bigger group of people compressed in a small enough space, with incredible administrators like Evan, right? Creating opportunities for people to meet one another 4 years. And like, that's part of your existence there, right? There's a more, I try to stress this with the people that I work with and the dozens of people that I've gotten to mentor personally. It's like, you will never have another time such as this in your life,
right?
Where you have this many people around you and available to you. And so how do we take advantage of that? How do we use that incredible potential of this time to be able to get into relationship with other people, not just one-off times, not just in a seminar or something like that. I'll get into that, as we continue on. But how do you kind of squeeze all you can out of this incredible opportunity? Having, I left the college campus in 2009, and I still have not found a place where I had more opportunity to do exactly what I'm talking about, right? 12 years later. So
I appreciate that dose of reality and hope, because that's kind of what I think what we want to get at with this conversation and the ones to follow. We're constantly bombarded and challenged now with suddenly becoming really a better society, like overnight. It's about time. It's good. But I know a lot of folks who are maybe in positions of being able to do things like the two of you maybe found yourselves in. It's hard to even begin where to start, to what do you do it? And then that can maybe sometimes transform into like, okay, this isn't impossible at all. So I really appreciate that you're both, have come at it with, we can do something. We can take away, some of the condemnation and the, judging before you know. So what can we do? And that's, I think, what I wanted to go to next is, what have you done? Because go ahead, Evan.
Thanks for saying that. I wanted to just kind of respond to, I love the term that Cam used about social potential, because, our schools, our institutions are tied to these like learning outcomes. And then on top of like these learning outcomes, you kind of set your core values and your goals. Anytime somebody in our department is getting ready to plan an event or a program, you have to like filter it through a certain pillar or like what we're committed to. And so this idea of social potential, having students where we can shape, because they are at a place where, we get an opportunity to catch them when they're coming in, and before we send them back out in the next chapter of their life, they will have been impacted by their experience on our campus. Yeah. And so things that we think about when it comes to programming, even in the curriculum, are things like interpersonal formation. Being a private faith-based school, certainly spiritual formation is one of those. But one of the other areas is like our intercultural formation. Like, does this give you an opportunity to connect with other students? Where are you learning things about diversity? What are your takeaways? And then sometimes like we assess students on these things, whether it's like a service learning project or certain things that they might participate in. And so that term, social potential, it just kind of led me right back to the why we do certain things. And these are like our hopeful outcomes, is that we put students in these spaces where community is created, where they will develop some interpersonal formation, vocational awareness, and spiritual formation. And then most importantly, based on this conversation, the intercultural part.
Yeah, that's definitely, I think it's a unique time. It's a unique season of a person's life. And I find it really interesting that you've both been able to see the students as, okay, this is a moment like never before. Because when I think back to being a student, I don't know that I thought that or realized that, and neither of you, either in the grassroots or in staff, I'm guessing you never had on in front of you in your job description, okay, part of what you have to do is to end prejudice, right? We'll like find out if you've done it or not. But Evan, it sounds like you've incorporated, or the institution has incorporated that as almost a metric or a goal as part of the activities. How does that, for both of you, what are the building blocks? What are the activities or the events or the things that you've done to attack this, to wrestle with it, on campus?
It's a tall order. We've tried our hand at a lot of different things. I don't know that we've like necessarily figured it out. We're constantly trying to improve in this area and try things. So whether they work or not, like we want to keep doing those things. Some of the approaches that we've taken have included partnering with End Prejudice with the Slam initiative. We had the Slam poetry battle. That's a cultural awareness type of thing, like an artistic expression, bringing in students together. it creates conversation. It puts people in a space where they can maybe get exposed to something that they're not used to. We've tried to certainly do it in our chapel programming, whether that was events or speakers and topics, conversations that they might not hear outside of that space. Something that I think about a lot is amplifying and centering voices that are sometimes like marginalized, whether that is offsetting the lack of Black faculty that we might have by having speakers who are Black, having speakers who are women, having speakers who are Hispanic, having speakers who are autistic. You know, we want to recognize Autism Awareness Month, or we want to recognize Indigenous Peoples Day, International Women's History Month. So we are trying to like weave in and out of like faces and voices, as well as these topics. The co-curricular thing, some of the annual stuff that we try to do are experiential trips, whether that's going to a museum and then do a talk back afterwards. Let's hit up a coffee shop, or let's go get food. All right, what did you get out of this specific exhibit? Get people talking.
Yep.
And so we've seen some good results with that, because we've had like really shy students who aren't as extroverted and they're kind of to themselves, but then they get to this museum with a group of other students, and then they all just start talking once they get, you know, in the room. And we try to see where their heads are at, whether it was the Charles Wright Museum or the DIA. So, I mean, we've tried to do a number of different things to get people in the room and see what happens.
Yeah, I hope people are writing these down, because I know it's hard to start. And I love that you're, you know, the goal isn't necessarily just education. Education is really important, but, you know, almost bringing folks to learn, like, hey, here's how you can learn on the go. You know, you don't necessarily have to stop and listen to just learn a new perspective.
Yeah, plus we learn from each other too.
Exactly. Yeah, it's great. Cam, when your time at OU, what were, I know you did a ton of things. What are some of the things that stand out to you as, okay, these are the ones that I'd love to share for people to know. These are the things you can do on a college campus to try to help end prejudice.
Sure. I'll stick with we'll focus here on the 2013 through 2018 era. That was my full-time grassroots organizing time at Oakland. I spent 5 years there.
Yeah, that's a good era.
And yeah, it was awesome. It's my, honestly, I never thought I would feel that way about my alma mater, but it's like my favorite place in the world to be. I'm jealous of Evan that he gets to be at his alma mater every day.
Yeah, that's great.
Thereabouts. But during that time, I launched 3 different initiatives, and the first one was called Cultivate. It was focused on discipleship and leadership development. And within that context, the key to ending prejudice, or at least not the key, but the efforts that we took primarily were in the form of education and how do I want to say it? Just awareness and acknowledgement of one another. So we had a couple different conferences, small conferences, about 30 to 40 people, day-long type things, where people got to learn about different racial and ethnic backgrounds, their racial and ethnic backgrounds. They got to understand some of the injustices that have been perpetuated within, different backgrounds and throughout history. And those are really powerful. People still remember those. People still reference those and talk about those and say, I remember when we did this. Remember when I heard from this person or that person. I think more importantly, like within our groups, within just our entire kind of cohort of leaders we were trying to develop, I fought hard. It was challenging. Fought hard to make sure there was staff representation or leadership representation in terms of training students, as well as representation amongst the students themselves. There's something really important for people to be able to understand that even from let's just say from a Christian perspective, because Cultivate was specifically centered on Christian discipleship and leadership development, that at their faith was not limited to maybe their own personal experience of it in this little part of the world. That there's a much greater global story, and that there's incredible contributions coming from all corners of the world, right?
Yeah.
And having people who were from just different countries, different backgrounds, who were saying, yeah, I'm a Christ follower. I grew up in this household, or I grew up in this other nation, was really beneficial. I think opened some people's eyes to say, whoa, I didn't realize that this was happening and that great things were happening outside of what I thought was great, right? That's a small example of bias and prejudice that existed, that we were able to, kind of start to work against a little bit. The other initiatives that I helped launch were primarily focused around welcoming international students and the international community. And I think when I talk about grassroots, let me just I'm talking about grassroots. I remember when I started to work and say, how can I engage the international community here at Oakland University and make sure that they feel welcome? I remember sitting outside of their orientation as people were leaving the orientation, maybe to go to the bathroom or something, and stopping them and saying, hey, hi, want to come to Art Speak and Eats with some friends of mine in a few days. I mean, we're talking 3 and 4 people coming to these things at the beginning that would eventually blossom into much larger events and such. But the hallmark of those initiatives was a value that we would often refer to as crossing the threshold, which is whatever we could do to get into each other's dwellings or living space. That was the key. Wow. So I would, started to actually bought a moving truck. I started with a minivan and a trailer, but then eventually, evolved into a moving truck, and we would grab free furniture. And whenever people would move in or, had need, we would assemble teams to go deliver it right into the apartments of a lot of these international students. And in so doing, we get a lot of people who would say hey, I need help. We'd build these cool relationships, and then that would start to move people towards hey, you want to come to this event? Hey, would you like to come over to someone's home for Thanksgiving or Christmas or what have you, right? Meals together, all sorts of interactions that were taking place, not in only large, more public spaces, but in more intimate, private spaces. And crossing the threshold like that was it kind of opened up a new world to me, right? So that started to happen around the second and third year that I was working at Oakland, and that started to become a hallmark of just about everything we did after that. How do we get into each other's living spaces? Because that started to do some things in terms of ending prejudice that I really hadn't gotten to see before, having done most of my work in more controlled environments, let's say, or public spaces. So I'll talk more about kind of the ethos behind that as well.
That's beautiful. The concept of welcoming as a way to fight, against preconceptions or false preconceptions is just it's so profound and so real and efficient. The first time I ever met Cam, or actually maybe saw Cam, was at Oakland University, mid 2000s. I took my date to a poetry night there. Don't cover yourself. This is long hair bandana Cam era. Yeah, I mean, it worked. We're married. That was date 3 with Joanna or something like that. And it was the most, I don't remember if you won, but you were definitely the most memorable poet. And I remember it I know that from then, even as far back as that, that spirit was in you. And to see, I just wanted to pause and say how amazing it is to know and see just the effort of continuing, starting with something.
Yeah.
Because I think of Cam doing his poetry at that age, kind of exposing me to poetry without us even really meeting, to the point where like now on, at Rochester University, Evan, you pick up the phone and say, hey man, can we do a slam live event here at Rochester University and Cam performing there? Absolutely killing it on stage.
Yes.
and like, I don't know, it broke a lot of hearts and shattered us into pieces. It was beautiful. And at the same time, the things that, we've learned are from things that a lot of you have just conversations that you've had to have on campuses because you started somewhere. And I think that's really encouraging, and the fruit that bears of like moving forward. Cam is, everything you learned through those Cultivate moments and international students like that has fed and informed End Prejudice, our circles, our conversations. Without you as a co-founder, we would of End Prejudice, we wouldn't have all these potential, opening conversations that we now have. So beautiful to know that you can start somewhere, and see fruit, whether it's immediate or like a decade later. So would you mind, both of you, exposing a little bit of maybe the failures, things that you would have done differently? Because I know that's probably in a lot of people's minds. Okay, what if I try something and something backfires, or I get pushback, or what if I try something and it just doesn't work? Were there initiatives, you don't have to go into detail too much if you don't want, but that didn't pan out as exactly as you thought you would, or didn't succeed? What would you have changed or done differently in those? Maybe back to Evan on that one.
Yeah, there's a number of things that are kind of bouncing through my mind that I wish would have been more successful. We measure success with calling extracurricular programming, not just by the number of people who attend. That's one metric. But sometimes it's simply about impact, right? You can have a small group of people, but it can be incredibly successful if they were positively impacted by that gathering, right? And they kind of checked off the boxes of why you put that event on. Some of the things that I've kind of learned from the failures is be careful with pre-scripting programming and events with like lofty, ambitious goals, because sometimes I want something that the students don't want. Sometimes I think something is going to be so cool and it's not even on their wavelength. They're like, no, that's not it. That's not the move. We don't want that. And it may show up in like their lack of participation or their, lack of excitement about said event. And so something to try to keep in mind for me that I've taken away of seeing certain events that didn't turn out the way we wanted to was inviting students into the conversation a little bit. Students have a way of really, like, when you give them voice and you give them agency and let them know that they're a part of something, it can do wonders. The engagement can like go through the roof because they take ownership over it. And so it's really being relational. And that's what we try to hang our hat on by being a small faith-based school, small class sizes, it's the kind of place where you can't slip through the cracks, and it's, looking people in the eye. And so something that we've had to change is, it doesn't matter if I have this like really cool announcement on the video screen in chapel, or dope flyers, or a cool social media campaign. They may not engage with any of that. And so it is a matter of being relational. It's inviting them into it. What do they want? Give them a voice, but it's the old fashioned, hey, I want you to be at this event because I think you're going to love it. You don't want to miss these poets coming from the slam poetry event. Like, that has more impact than just like, oh, here's a flyer and then keep it moving. It's looking somebody in the eye. It's really old fashioned. It's almost different than what this generation does, right? Because we're always in our phones and or all of the things. And so I have learned to just do the marketing, do the social media, come up with ideas. I get the pleasure of like working with student leaders, and I really rely on them to say, y'all tell me if this is not what we should be doing, what should we be doing? What are your friends saying? So inviting them into that space, and then making sure if we want engagement, they need to know that we value them being there and not just a number. Like, we want them to experience whatever the purpose of that event is.
Yeah. Thanks. No, that I appreciate you sharing that. And And the thought of assessing impact is, I think, something maybe people might want to hear a little more about. Is that been like, I just been part of a lot of initiatives that it's like, okay, this is how we're going to measure it. And then, you know, a year later, if we go back through the scoring sheets, they're either not filled or people don't know how to fill them. You know, how does that work in practicality? Is it just a matter of like asking students, was this impactful, yes or no? Or is it just a gut feeling that you have as a
little bit of both? A little bit of both. Being like a faith-based school, you know, like whether it's chapel or we do like this worship night called the offering. This might be a great example. And so whether or not it's well attended is one thing, but if someone comes away from that event saying, wow, this was a great experience. More specifically, we were getting pretty good attendance last year with our offering in-person gatherings. We get together on Thursday nights, have a worship band, do some music, and then afterwards people can hang out. And so it's always a really good time. This one specific night, we had students who don't really have a lot of faith context, don't really go to church. And whoever was leading kind of broke the norm from just like singing and inviting the people. And somebody like got up and gave words and said, hey, we're going to do something different. We're going to like really make the students feel uncomfortable, because I think they asked them like get in a circle and pray. And they like broke off in like little groups. And there was this student there, and I remember we was like 30 something people there, but I remember this one specific student because she communicated with another student leader. The young lady said, I came to this school to get away from my family and get away from some things that were, you know, happening in church. And I decided I don't want to be a Christian anymore, but I would give this school a try. And tonight I've decided to like recommit my life to Christ. I want to be a Christian. This is the life I need. You guys have no idea what this night meant to me. That was it. That was all I needed to hear. I got the text message from the student leader and I was no good, you know. I was like, this is fantastic. This is everything that we need in order to judge the effectiveness of what we were trying to accomplish. So
that's good.
Sometimes it's not always about numbers. Sometimes it's about impact.
That's incredible. I mean, you wouldn't get that text without the relationship and the student leaders in place. That's great. That's really good.
And on the practical side, like we try to track it, like touch base with people so that we can hear what the feedback is. You know, when you're a school like us, like we want feedback on everything. So we don't want to do survey fatigue, but we do try to find ways where we are capturing data from people in a few different ways.
That's really good. Thank you. Cam.
That's so cool.
Yeah. Learn lessons from failures maybe now.
Learn lessons.
Yeah.
Well, I when I was thinking about this question, I was thinking about, again, the big kind of aha moment for us was getting people into each other's living spaces, right? It started to impact everything. Because you can probably remember almost every house you've ever been in, like from the time you were probably like 10 years old on, and how many houses and, you know, around how many people's tables will you actually sit in your life? You know, I think if you're at 100, you're pretty much a pretty rich person socially. I think for a lot of people that number's less than 30, less than 25. And and again, those conversations, those experiences are so impactful. And I think that in the beginning, we weren't building around that because it didn't feel as important. It didn't feel as especially you couldn't advertise it very well. It's like it's a much harder ask. It's a much harder yes to get, to say, hey, you want to go and be in somebody's house. It's just a more intimidating experience. But when we stopped letting that get the better of us and we just started pushing that in every initiative that we had, I think we started to see a lot more success in terms of ending prejudice, because as those experiences started to happen, people were able to articulate. Sometimes I like to call it like sharing and shedding their biases. Okay. And the sharing is so critical to that. So they would they would share, I used to think this, right?
Wow.
Like this experience would do something to them to such a degree where they would say, I used to think this. Some of those things they used to think were conscious and some of those things were not. But getting that verbally out is so critical. That's a huge evaluation tool that I'm always looking to hear. Are people able to say, I used to, or I used to believe this, I used to think this about this person or this group of people or what have you. And then say, but now I, or as a result of meeting these people, I realized that, and what I'm really looking for is, I was wrong. I didn't know. I'm excited to know more. not I used to think this, but now I think only this. No, we're looking for a greater curiosity, right? And I think that certain initiatives that we did early on didn't necessarily spark that. And it all revolves around a framework that I learned. It's not exclusive to her. But I learned it through Brenda McNeil in her book, Roadmap to Reconciliation, when she talks about the framework of contact theory, right? Mm-hmm. And contact theory, this is just from her book, it's that contact theory suggests that relationships between conflicting, or at least in our case, prejudiced groups or individuals will improve if they have meaningful contact with one another over an extended period of time. And this contact must occur in a mutually beneficial learning environment and involve multiple opportunities for the participants to have cooperative interactions with one another. Yeah. And this type of contact will likely decrease the hostility between groups because the animosity or biases are typically fueled by stereotypes that result from limited exposure. And how we can get to greater exposure, we started to find that the more that we started to get, it didn't have to be bigger, it just had to be more prolonged exposure. That's kind of the essence. So whatever we could do to get more prolonged exposure, and I think we made a lot of mistakes in the beginning, trying to do better content versus longer exposure, better content, longer. Right. And we, I think even in our experience, as we were trying to build what will become, the Circles initiative out of End Prejudice, we spent a lot of time in the beginning on content and crafting these conversations and things like that, right? And I think what we started to find was it didn't really matter as much what we crafted as long as the conversations were meaningful enough for people to stay in, engage again, come back, engage again, see each other again, engage again. And over time, we started to see some things that I don't think we would never have predicted.
Absolutely. So, we'll put a link to the book on the descriptions, and so you guys can catch that. It has influenced.
Excellent.
So if books was on Evan's introductory bio, so if Evan gives it the approval and Cam mentions it, then please check it out. That's a really encouraging insight, Cam, because I think because unity was used for so long, I think culturally, as a way to kind of silence justice, right? Like, we just got to get along. We just got to get together in the same room, pop commercial kind of approach to our problems. I think there's a major pushback culturally now on anything that has to do with like conversation, unity, getting along. And so, and I understand why, and it has been misused, and we can still misuse it if we're not careful, but we cannot abandon it, because the context of the like you said, the committed, prolonged like interaction with one another is powerful.
Yeah.
Just because it's been misused doesn't mean it is not a powerful and a tool that we should use, or we should, default to, because at the end, we are still human. Like we need the relationship to really understand and be convinced, like you said, Game. I mean, those conversations we've seen, like when someone says, I didn't know. And it's amazing that your eyes are open before you even realize that you had a prejudicial, incorrect thought about someone. You never really knew that you had it. You only knew it. You only realized it when you saw the opposite of it.
Yeah.
So incredible. And I think college campuses are such a fruitful place to do that in. All right, let's head towards the end here a little bit. Zooming back to not your time today as in your time in staff or grassroots. How did your time as students kind of shape what you're doing today? I know that sounds like a leading question, a beginning question, but I think because we don't have any students here in the conversation right now, and they're going to shape this, they're going to, in a way, lead this fight more than any of us can at this point. How did that impact you? And it's really cool and maybe unique in a way that you're both serving or have served in your alma maters, like in the schools that you went to as students, So, Evan, your time as a student, how did that shape you? How did that impact your fight against prejudice today?
It did. It definitely did. I believe that my time as a student at Rochester holds a lot of influence on the work that I do today and how I look at other students. I'm not saying I always get it right, but I have an easier time of putting myself in their shoes. Even though when I was there, it was a long time ago, and a lot has changed. I kind of joke with these students before I moved into this role. I spent a little bit of time working at Mission, so I kind of recruited primarily in the Wayne County area. And so I was like, you guys just don't know how good y'all have it from the time that I was there. I won't say how long ago, but a long time ago. So one, it helps me because I'm very much more sensitive to what their experiences are, thinking about where they come from. Specifically, my experience as a student, I went to a school that did not look like Rochester College. It was Rochester College at the time, or now Rochester University. And so there was like culture shock, right? There was the makeup of the campus didn't look like my high school. I went to a high school where it was essentially an all-Black school. It wasn't very diverse in that regard, and it was just the complete opposite in coming to Rochester. And it was a long time ago, so some of the practices and things that were a norm at the school on campus were different than they are now. And so now, fast forward, here I am in a position that can think about students who look like me, or even having had an opportunity to work with international students who are student athletes, being sensitive to like some of their, what those transitions are like, just trying to do my best to make it as easy as possible and be available. Sports was something that helped me with that, like being an assistant coach for 5 years, it helped me understand communication. Like I might be getting ready to like go after a player because, he wasn't going hard enough or whatever the case is. But then I have to think about, okay, all right, there might be a little bit of a language barrier here with this specific student athlete because they're from a different country. I need to make sure that they understand me first. And so whether it was the interactions I had with other students as my time as a student, my experiences there with staff and faculty, all influential to what I do today. It just kind of helps me think about our students. So it's very impactful in that regard.
Yeah, it makes sense knowing you then and knowing you now, and it's just so encouraging to see. Fast forward, we would have never guessed. Like, hey, now you get to shape this campus from a different point of view, and I'm really happy for them. I think a lot of people are that you're in that position. You get to do that. How about you, Cam? Looking back on your student time.
Well, again, I empathize with Evan. He's talking about a long time ago. The more gray hairs that are showing up over here, the harder it became to organize at the grassroots level. People will be like, "What are you doing?" But when I was a student, it was awesome. It was a marvelous time for me because, well, let me say this: it was kind of a tale of two different experiences. Freshman and sophomore year, I kept a lot more to myself, really hard driving. And actually, this is a credit to the faith community, the Christian community at Oakland. I was about as atheist as they came, and kind of went on a wholesale conversion. And that's a whole different story between sophomore and junior year. But I bring it up because that conversion allowed me to meet a faith leader and a mentor who back in 2007 was helping me understand how ending prejudice, how racial justice didn't just like fit into the gospel, but like has its basis in the gospel. And again, that was almost 15 years ago, and that's huge because it's hard to find today, and to find it 15 years ago was even harder. So I consider myself extremely fortunate to have somebody who had helped helped shape my faith journey at that critical point with this information as well, make it important to me, which led to a really interesting senior year, which kind of alluded to H, where I was, where we launched this open mic, and I wanted to meet people. I didn't want to live in a bubble. I wanted to engage more and more folks, and I found it really difficult. I found it difficult to get into those intimate spaces with people in some of the things that just existed at Oakland University at the time. No knock on OU. It's a challenge, right? To create these spaces. And so myself and a few friends as students, all kind of representing different artist communities. I was the aspiring poet, but that open mic night, man, that was not just poetry, if you recall. There was hip hop. There'd be bands that would come in. I mean, we had two rules. We had two key rules. One was that the only way you could hear about it was word of mouth. That's what we called it, even, so that you could, so that the culture of personal invitation and getting to know one another was built right into it. No advertising of any sort on any sort of other channels. And the second thing was that everybody, any art medium, anybody was welcome to perform. You just had 5 minutes, and that was it. No one got a second song or a second poem or whatever. And it took off. And I was extremely fortunate in that regard too, because man, there have been a million of those things that have been started and didn't take off. And this one just happened to. And so as a result, I got to grow really close with the people who I helped start it with, right? People who were more integrated into the hip hop community, the folk music community, garage rock community, comedy communities on campus. Yeah. And these different art communities had a lot of different people too. A lot, and every time someone was coming to the stage, I'm sure someone in that audience was dealing with a bias.
Wow.
Thinking like, I know what they're gonna say, or I know what they're gonna do, or they're gonna. I think they're gonna be awesome or not. And so we had the opportunity to have these biases just brought forth and then blown up in this 5-minute space. And then I got to actually follow up and have conversations with everybody, because I was the owner of the sign-up sheet. So I could be like, hey, you perform, going to get lunch in the cafeteria. And so again, for me, these were the critical the critical steps, the critical aspects that informed the work that I do today, right? Being able to start and launch things, having people in my life. If you're lucky enough to be at Rochester where Evan's on staff, right, to have someone like that in your life who can speak into it and mentor you, and help you cultivate your heart for ending prejudice and working toward justice and reconciliation. It's priceless. The fact that I received that, and that's what I hope to see more and more. At least that's the legacy I hope that plays, things like Cultivate Leave over at OU and wherever else, it kind of takes people, is that those people exist to mentor and to invest and to speak into the lives of students in this way.
Absolutely.
That's great.
Yeah, it's really encouraging. So if you had any last words to leave off the audience with, folks who are listening and going, okay, I want to do this. I don't know how to deal with the pushback. What's my first step? If they're on campus, whether they're a student or staff member or grassroots, I believe that they can, your words maybe can help start movements and get the students, the future Evans and Cams out there, like get their life, their journey going. What would be the one thing you say, here's how you start and here's how you deal with any obstacle if you hear this emerging from the surface today?
I would say both. If you are a staff person and a student, so whether you're staff or student, having grace, being gracious towards people, and knowing that we all come from so many different backgrounds and different places, and we will all continually have a lot to learn. And we won't always get it right, but it helps being gracious towards one another. It like helps towards like a harmonious type of community, right? It helps like alleviate any potential hostility that could arise. So I would say for that. Number two, if it is a student, if a student is interested, like student affairs people love when students find an interest, a passion in anything. And so whether it is a new club, whether it is asking questions, like I literally have an open door policy. I'm always, anxious to connect and meet with students, to hear them, whatever their concerns are, like the good, the bad, the ugly, like we want to know. And so if it's a student, speak up. If you are a student who has witnessed something that was unfavorable, speak up. If you desire to see something like improved, speak up. Like students have all the power. They are the paying customer. Like we are there literally to serve them. And so anytime a student is feeling compelled, led, or they want something, like we want to hear it, we want to know about it, particularly when it comes to something that can improve community. Like schools spend lots of money to promote community, right? We want to have this like authentic experience and actually live into these values. And so I would encourage students to help hold us accountable to those mission statements and these, fancy words and all the stuff that we do, but get involved and don't be afraid to do so.
That's great. I hope if somebody needed just a nudge to take that step, I hope they heard that. That's good. Cam, how about you?
Yeah, I would just encourage you to do things in your own life that you think other people would be interested in. There's a lot of things that I like to do, like nerd out on fantasy sports and things like that not a lot of other people would want to do, right? But there's other things that I've started when I think about others first, and I think, okay, what would be fun? What would be fun for somebody else? Heck, even if I was just researching, one of the things that we wound up doing that allowed me to be an inviter. Okay, this is going to get to be an inviter. Got to think of invitational things to do. We found this on social media sometime. I can't remember, in 2011. We called it was called scouching, and it's basically like you put skis on a couch, and that's what we did. We put skis on a couch and invited people to come, and you would not imagine the kind of cross section of people, because everybody wants to ride a couch on skis. It's like, why is this? So find weird stuff. Think about the kind of things that other people, especially people that have different backgrounds than you would like to do, and then find a way to just start doing it. Again, if you've got great, I think Evan's right. I had great administrators. I remember going to them about the open mic thing, and I got green lighted. We got green lighted way past what we should have gotten green lighted to be able to do this kind of work. Because again, if you start to become known as someone who's an inviter into neat or novel experiences, now you have the opportunity where when you want to sit down with people on a more extended basis, you're going to be welcome at the table, right? I never wanted to be known as the furniture guy with, the international students, or the scouting guy. Like, I didn't set out for those types of things, but those were things I could do one day or a few times a year that would enable me to go around and get invited to tables. The second thing, all right, is that every good thing happens like around food. So whether you're a commuter, whether you're living on campus, these conversations, the conversations that launched our open mic community, that all happened in the dining hall. The kind of conversations I was talking about, where people were saying, I used to believe this, but now I'm realizing how wrong I was. Those happened after dinners around each other's tables.
Yeah.
Right. So what I think if I were to say, hey, like, go start having dinner with people, I think for a lot of people that's really intimidating. Just to go, if that's you and you can skip step one and you can just be like, I don't care, I'll roll up to whatever table and just start, hanging out and starting to make friends for the long term, continued exposure, contact theory. Well, then just go for it. What's stopping you? But if you're like, man, that's not me. It doesn't have to be something big, like scouting. It could be something small. It could be fantasy sports. It could be starting the fantasy, the fantasy league on your floor, and getting to and then just following up and talking about it with each person. If you can be the one who becomes the inviter into whatever small or big or weird, or thing that some people can grab onto, and then you can transition that into a meal. And then that meal into several other meals. I'm trying to get real specific. Like, aim literally for like 10 meals with this person. If you can get to 10, all right, you're never going to be forgotten, and you're probably going to learn a whole bunch about yourself, and you're going to learn a whole bunch about them. And pretty soon you might fall in a rhythm. You might start getting invited to places, because the ultimate goal, again, for me, is whatever it takes to get into that person's living space. If you enter that person's living space, all right, that is where the prejudices that you have, and from my own experience, become the most, like, they all of a sudden, they illuminate. You become conscious of them, and then you can shed them, and you can share them, and you can help other people too.
That's awesome.
So good. Yeah. I can't think of two people that probably
Facebook me, and if you're like, I don't know what something weird is to get it started, you can just contact me. We'll discuss. I have an open DM policy about weird ideas. So.
I appreciate that. If we get the okay, we'll put your contacts on here so everyone can reach you both, so they can keep the conversation going. If anyone's planning meals and they're good, invite us, even if they're not good, especially if they're good. By the way, I was driving my family through local university campus the other day, and I told my kids about what you guys did down that hill with couches, and my kids were like, they do what? We've never done this? Like, okay. So, yeah.
Everybody loves scouting. I'm just going to say.
Yeah, you have to be a real...
Once.
At least, right. Oh, well, this was really, really good. I really hope a lot of people get to see this and hear your hearts and your practical steps you shared here, because we really believe in ending prejudice. I agree 100% with both of you. It's not something that we're doing until we get it done and then checking. We know this is crazy. We know it's impossible. We know it's going to stay here, but we also know we have a job here to continue fighting for unity and against prejudice. So, any last words from either of you?
Thanks for the time, Age. Wonderful.
It's been great. Thank you. Thank you both.
Thank you. Absolutely. Hope all of you can catch us next time. Share this. Let everyone know about it, especially if they're in a college campus context. If you have feedback for us, please contact us at endprejudice.org. We'd love to hear from you. We'd love to continue learning with all of you. I'm H. Cabral, and for Evan and Cam, thank you for joining us. Have a great one. Bye-bye.